Again, today's topic is our Liveaway program in Malta next year. Very excited about this new concept, this new destination in our Liveaway series, the first of several new ones that we are going to be introducing. And as I said before we started, a warm welcome from here in Cyprus. Here's a few of our group members out on a beach walk, which we did just the other day. And one of the fun activities that we've done in our free time, and this is really part of what the Liveaways are all about, is that it's not like a conventional tour, because we have a lot of free time to sort of do our own thing. So what did we decide to do last weekend? We didn't have any special excursions planned. So we said, hey, there's this beautiful beach down the way. Let's go for a walk. So I think we ended up walking for about 9 kilometers on a beautiful sunny day. The weather, as I say, is a little bit cool. You can see everybody dressed in jackets there. And we had a marvelous time, and it was great to just, and people remark that sometimes the best things to do when you're out visiting a place for a longer time, just go out for long walks. And I know we've done a lot of that here in Cyprus, and we will do the same thing in Malta. And you'll see why from some of the pictures if you don't know what Malta is all about. That's obviously the purpose of this webinar. And the purpose of Wheel&Anchor, our community here, is all about bringing travelers together. And the Liveaway is one of the best ways to do that, because when you spend time with people who are, call them like-minded, a term that we often sort of bat around here, because it's been very interesting now. I'm partway through our second Liveaway program here in Cyprus, and already the bonds of friendship are becoming clear. I mean, a few people obviously knew each other coming in, but most didn't. And yet when you spend some time together and you share your past experiences from travel and all aspects of life, not to mention your aspirations. You know, it's interesting. You put a bunch of travelers in a room. What do they talk about? Travel. And I always find it funny because, no sooner do they land here in this a wonderful place like this, and all they can talk about is about, the next place that they want to go to, or the last place they came from. But that's part of this experience and this dynamic that we have. And we love to bring travelers from all across Canada. And we do specialize in Canadians. We have a handful of folks from other countries that join us, but it's mostly Canadians. And again, I think it's something that sets us apart from some of our peers in travel. Joining me today on our webinar, my name is Gordon. I'm the founder of Wheel&Anchor. I'm familiar with, or I've met a lot of familiar names that I see. I'm joined today by, in the background, Joel, who does our technical support and is my partner in Wheel&Anchor. And we're all partners here. Paula, whom many of you have spoken to, our senior trip specialist, is there on the screen faithfully standing by as always. And our special guest today, all the way from Valletta, Malta, is Mike Rizzo. Welcome, Mike.
Hi there.
And so Mike is, you're obviously Maltese, and and you've been, we've worked together for a few years now, but give us a very quick overview of your background around travel and your organization, because it's quite special.
Okay. I'm actually originally a chartered accountant. I used to live in the United Kingdom. So I grew up there, studied there. And then when I qualified, I came back to Malta, my homeland. So I've been here now for over 20 years. I don't like to count, but they are piling up. I've been working in travel for the last 15 years. And our company is named after my father-in-law. And we've been welcoming Canadians to the Maltese Islands for over 30 years. So we have quite a history of
we have one of the most
with Canadians.
Indeed, and one of the most seasoned veterans for travel in Malta, particularly for Canadians. Let me say a few words about the concept of Liveaways. And so this is something that we came up with during the early part of COVID. And I spent some time talking to colleagues across the industry in different parts of the world, as well as to our members. And we were looking at what is the trend in travel going to be, particularly amongst our core demographic of people, which of course are largely retired Canadians, people sort of in the 55 plus age bracket. And that what we came back with, it was based on a lot of the comments about travel up to date, which was, is a lot of, we need to see as many places as possible, and therefore we're in a hurry and we're going from place to place to place. And I think a lot of people really appreciate the fact that or would appreciate spending more time, because let's face it, less is more when it comes to travel. And the members who I've traveled with recently hear me say that all the time. We're not going to see everything, so why not let's spend time to really enjoy and immerse ourselves. And so that's the idea of a Liveaway. It's a longer stay, but not just a longer stay. As you know, I know that there are other companies that have done similar things in the past, where you sort of get stuck in a hotel because the weather's nice, and you're just staying there. But this is about living someplace and getting a chance to sample what life is like. Secondly, the fact that we do things in a flexible way, so you can do as much or as little as you like. We give you a whole assortment of excursions to choose from, and an activity credit, so you can select the things that are most interesting to you. Those who are really anxious to get up and be busy every single day can do more, and others who are just keen to sort of relax and soak it all in, and happy to take things at a much slower pace can just opt for less. And in some cases, actually, even in Madeira, we had folks that did less. They spent less on their excursions and activities, and we issued them a refund for the difference, because and they really appreciated the fact that they weren't being compelled to do everything. And so that's, I think, a big feature of our program. And particularly now what we're doing with our Liveaway programs, because we've seen that and more people want to spend a longer time away, longer than even just 1 month. And so we're creating these combined programs where you can combine programs in the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, for example, Madeira and Cyprus and Malta, and our soon to be released program for Sicily. You could spend a month in one and 2 weeks in the other, or 2 and 2. Or 2 and 4, or whatever the combination you like. So this way you could spend the better part of the winter enjoying the lovely temperate climate in the Mediterranean, or similarly in our Liveaway programs in Southeast Asia, which we have recently announced Koh Samui in Thailand, as well as Bali. So that's a little bit to our concept. Let's come back to Malta, and I want to get Mike sharing a little bit about his wonderful country, why people choose Malta, why you would go to Malta. A couple of points from me before we hear what Mike says about all the Canadians he's welcomed to Malta before. But I think, as I say, because we do this in the off season, so it's the winter time is the quieter time of the year in Malta, but the weather is pleasant. Malta is one of the sunniest places in Europe. And so, the weather is not tropical warm, but it's usually quite mild, quite comfortable, and ideal for hanging around and touring and walking around the different cities in Malta. Of course, everybody speaks English there. It's is it an official language in Malta, English, or? Yeah.
It's one of the 2 official languages, that's right.
Exactly. And that's a big, bonus as well, because, let's face it, some of these other places, although in tourism people speak English, but of course, you may find people in the street, could find communication difficulties, but in Malta, that is not the case. And of course, the rich history. And I think Malta is one of the densest places in the world for ancient history. Mike, what other things do you think attract people to Malta?
Well, first of all, happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone, for those of you watching this live. As you may know, St. Patrick wasn't actually born in Ireland. He was born in England, but he crossed over to Ireland and was welcomed there and became bishop and patron saint in Ireland. And we have a similar but slightly older history with St. Paul, who came to our islands. He was one of the first tourists to Malta in 60 AD. So we have a long history of welcoming people from all over the world. And since then, we've been ruled by many different nations: Arabs, Normans, Aragonese, and others have left their traces on the island, such as the Phoenicians, Carthaginians, Romans, and probably most notably the Knights. you're going to be staying in Valletta as a base. And Valletta is a fortified city. It's our capital city, and it was built by the knights. It was built to withstand the invasions of the Turks. Thankfully, the Turks never came back, so it's pretty much left intact and in the same condition that it was when it was built in 1565. So yes, we have a long history of welcoming people. We also have a long history that predates the knights, though. We have some of the oldest freestanding megalithic temples in the world, and they predate even the pyramids of Egypt. So those were built starting from 3600 BC. They're World Heritage Sites listed with UNESCO. So we have a rich history. We also have the sand and sea. Now we kind of take the sea for granted in Malta because it's a small island, only 300 or so square kilometers. So wherever you go, you see the sea. But I know if you come from Canada, it's slightly further to get to the coast. So it's definitely something we take for granted. But I'm sure it's something that many Canadians mention. As you mentioned, as you can see, most of the photos you have today have some sea in them. We have over 300 days of sunshine, and the time you're proposing, which is end of February, March, is really an ideal time of the year. It's when Malta's at its most greenest because we get a little bit of rain from November through to January. So by the time you come, everywhere's looking nice and green and clean. It's also not too busy because the main tourist period probably picks up in late April, just after Easter. So you're not going to get the crowds. And it's also not too hot. Temperatures are around 17 degrees Celsius. So it's really an ideal climate to be visiting all the sites.
It's a perfect time of year, indeed. A perfect time of year. So on let's talk a little bit about when we are in a program like this. And let's go first of all and have a look at the map. I think most people ought to know where Malta is, which is obviously in the central part of the Mediterranean. And the African continent. And as I just mentioned, it's a pretty about 300. This is one of the benefits. Staying in the cap. Is that fair to say, Mike?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Yeah.
Paula, can you hear me okay?
No, you're cutting out, Gordon.
No problem. I was just saying that you. Yeah. Okay.
Just bear with us. We'll see if Gordon can get onto a better connection for internet. The challenges of trying to do these things, traveling the world, right? I guess. Mike, do you want to share with us a little bit more about Malta, just in general, like culture, history, the food that we might encounter? And yeah, we can share a little bit more.
I mentioned the Knights of Malta. One thing they did bring us is obviously Valletta, which we've spoken about, but they also brought they were essentially here on holiday. They brought their gastronomy, their food. A lot of Maltese people worked in their kitchens, and therefore we've adopted all the food that they brought. The knights came from 7 different longs, which were the kind of nations from all around Europe. So our gastronomy is a total mix of European foods. So there's something for everyone, in Malta. We're also made up of 3 islands, so there's a lot to explore. You're going to be on the main island of Malta, but it's very short distances involved. We're only 317 kilometers square. Doesn't take very long to get from one place to another. Takes about an hour to get to the islands of Comino and Grotto each way. And there are ferries every day, almost every hour even at this time of the year. So there's lots to explore. We do have 15 excursions, which we are offering. So there's more than enough to do if you come for 2 weeks, or even if you come for 4 weeks. There's something for everyone for almost every day.
Okay, great. I think I'm back now. My apologies. I'm at the mercy of technology here, and the internet, it seems to be a little bit less stable than we're used to. So my apologies. Let's hope it doesn't cut out again. Thanks, Mike, for filling in some more information about Malta. Let's talk a little bit about the accommodation. We've got 3 different choices here. And the one thing I want to point out, the most important part, is that we've decided to stay right in Valletta. And if you've traveled to Malta before, there's a lot of different places that you can stay. There's built up areas along the whole sort of north coast of the island. But to be in or around the ancient city of Valletta is really the place to be. And so the 3 hotels that we've chosen are in this area. So first of all, the Grand Hotel Excelsior is a stunning hotel located. It's built right into the walls of Valletta, and as you can see here, it's on the harbor. It's on the other side from the Grand Harbor, but you have some wonderful views overlooking Sliema and the other parts of across this little bay. You have access by ferry across to the other side. And the hotel is a full service hotel with all the amenities that you can expect. It's got pools and saunas and wellness facilities. And what are some of the other key sort of highlights of this hotel, Mike?
It's a great 5-star hotel. As you said, it's got all the facilities and amenities that you expect. It's got, as you said, also some fantastic views of Marsamxett Harbour. It's also within 5 minutes from the center, 5 minutes walk from the center of Valletta. So it's easily accessible, but it's in a quieter area, so it's not in the hustle and bustle.
It's not in the hustle and bustle. I think it's one of the big features of this. And again, it's a larger property, which means that you've got all the facilities that you could hope for, pools. And so it's really a wonderful place if you're somebody that enjoys sort of soaking up the amenities of the hotel. Quite a great spot. The second one that we've got is actually a 4-star property, but the St. John is in the center of Valletta, on one of the ancient streets in a completely refurbished Maltese house. This is actually the front facade of the hotel. And so the big advantage of staying at a place like the St. John is that, first of all, it's the location. Is that you're right in the thick of things. Along on the street, I stayed actually at this hotel when I was here just a couple of months ago. And you've got right outside the door, you've got restaurants and bars. And the thing about Valletta is that it's not one of those ancient cities that goes to sleep at night. Quite the opposite. It comes alive at night. And so people are out and enjoying dinner on the terraces outside. And there's cafes and bars. And by staying at the St. John, you're literally right in the middle of all of that. They have beautifully designed rooms. So they've completely changed the look and feel in the inside to be this sort of contemporary loft style feel, very, very comfortable. And it's a great place to be. if you want to be in the center of town. And again, although it's a 4-star hotel, it really has a wonderful feel to it. You actually have breakfast when you stay at the St. John at the adjacent 5-star property that's part of the same group. And so that's why we really, really like the St. John. And the third one is sort of the grand dame, if you will, of Maltese hotels. It's the Phoenicia, which is directly opposite the main gate or the main entrance to Valletta. And as you can see from some of the images here, it is really incredible, and it is restored to I think the original look and feel as it was when it was originally built. Is that not the case, Mike?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Phoenicia is a lovely 5-star hotel. You've got it's basically speaks luxury. You know, you've got English high tea in the afternoons. It's fantastic. It's got some lovely gardens as well, surrounded by space, views of the harbour, distant views of the harbour, and as you said, right on the main entrance gate to Valletta, so very convenient.
And again, one of the nice features about the Phoenicia is that it's as Mike said, it's got a lot of green space. And I remember walking through all these beautiful gardens to the swimming pool area that they have, which is again right up against one of the ancient walls of Valletta. And so you have this oasis that is in and amongst the hustle bustle of Valletta. So it really is a marvelous property, and I think for those really seeking the best in accommodation in Valletta, the Phoenicia would be the place to stay. So those are the 3 properties, and the good thing is that they are within, I would say, about a 10-minute walk of each other. So we can travel here as a Liveaway group, and we can still share all the moments together, regardless of which property that we're staying in, and certainly all the excursions, because they're very close together. And the Phoenicia and the Excelsior being just outside the main gate, and the St. John being inside the city, our excursions would leave from one central point, so that it would be easy for us to congregate and be able to go off and enjoy our tours. So let's talk a little bit about a typical day, and a typical day on a Liveaway really depends on how you like to pace things when you're traveling, and so it's the key thing here is that it's a relaxed pace. So you might get up in the morning and have breakfast at the hotel at one of the lovely buffets or a la carte restaurants that they have available. And then if you're not already booked on an excursion, and I think an important thing is that we try to have all of our activities and excursions starting at 9 or after 9 o'clock in the morning. So there's no early wake up calls for the most part. If you're not partaking in one of those, the thing that for me is what I like to do when I'm in Malta is just walk. And whether I'm walking in and around the streets of Valletta, or I hop on the little ferry that takes you across the Grand Harbor to the 3 cities, which is what you can see from this view here, looking out across and walking along all of these wonderful promenades or sidewalks that go in front of the different parts of Valletta. You could walk literally for days and days and days and see this beautiful city from so many different angles. And you might stop at a little fish restaurant somewhere for lunch, or there's numerous museums and galleries and places that you might go. For others that fancy a round of golf, there's golf courses that you could take in on Malta. So that's something that caters to people who like to play around of golf. And you can also, we provide passes for the local bus system, very easy to use. And so you can really hit many points of the island on your own. And like I say always, it's nice to go sometimes and just take off and get a bit lost. You can't get too far. It's not a big island. And then often in the evenings, we will come together and have dinner either as a group, or obviously we can go on our own if we prefer some of our own time. Flexibility, but at the same time knowing that you've got a community of people that you're traveling with. So there's always somebody there. We have often have a lot of solo travelers in our group that like to get together and sort of undertake things. So that's kind of what an average day would look like, or a typical day. But I'd like Mike to share with us some of the things that we might do. As he mentioned, we've got so far a selection of about 15 different excursions and activities. So if you were staying for a whole month, there would be lots to do. Mike, tell us what is special about each one of these ones. We're not going to go through all of them today, but we've picked a few of the key ones that I think would make an experience in Malta particularly special. So share with us briefly about the Blue Grotto and the Sunday Market, which I think leaves from the fishing village that I always,
yeah.
I can never pronounce the names of.
Yeah, it's Marsa Schlock. The X in Maltese is pronounced as SH, so it's Marsa Schlock. The Marsa Schlock market is typically on a Sunday and also possible on a Friday. It's a typical market where you've got locals buying their fish. It's a fishing village, so there's lots of fish there. There are a lot of it's a touristic market as well. So you'll find all the local produced handicrafts and gifts that you may want to take home to your family. And before that, we go to the Blue Grotto, little boats of up to 8 people on each boat, and it's a half-hour ride, 50 minutes from where the boat docks to the beautiful Blue Grotto, where you see all the azure colors coming out in the caves. So that's a typical half-day excursion.
Absolutely. And when you go to this harbor and you see all the blue boats like you see pictured here, it's just a picture postcard, and the water, which is so clear and fantastic. And you'll see a few images in a second, because the coastline of Malta is something that just has to be taken in. Obviously, I talked about the history, and you can't talk about history in Malta without talking about the medieval city of Medina, which is in the center of, or more or less in the center, up on a high hill. You can see it from everywhere. Tell us a bit about Medina.
Medina is a special place. It was originally the capital of Malta. It's a walled city. It's been inhabited for hundreds of years, over 1,000 in fact, and it's on a hill. They fortified the city. It was a natural capital until the knights came along, and they had their boats. Obviously, they didn't have airplanes in those days, so they moved the capital to Valletta because that was near their kind of their boats and the harbour. But Medina is a beautiful place. It's known as the Silent City because there are no cars allowed other than those belonging to the residents. So it's all cobblestones, a really peaceful city with some fantastic views because it's one of the highest points in Malta. So you get to see all the way down to Valletta, and you see most of the island from Medina.
You can see most of the island from the peak, and because it's such a small island, you can see sort of the sea in well, not all directions, but certainly to the north and to the south. So, and again, it oozes with the history of the island. And another experience that we put together here is this Valletta at war. And as Mike mentioned, of course, it's been settled by all kinds of different people who passed over the island over centuries. And so the point of this trip, Mike, is exploring the war history, I guess, of the island. Yeah.
Yeah. The great thing about Valletta is there's so much in Valletta to see. So whether you're on your own or on one of these excursions, there's so much to see in Valletta. And one of the things, obviously, that we are offering is a half-day excursion visiting various sites associated with essentially the Second World War. So we've got the Lascaris war rooms, which are really interesting. It's where it was a secret area. Originally, it was where the knights, the slaves of the knights, used to live. It's deep within the walls. It's about 30 meters below the walls. So it was an ideal place for the British and then the Allied forces to have their headquarters, secret headquarters. And if I'm not mistaken, it's where they Operation Pedestal, the invasion of Sicily, was organized and directed from. So it's a really fascinating place.
Fascinating. So we get a taste of all of these, places like this that really tell the story about the wartime history. And of course, when you come into Valletta, when you do a cruise of the Grand Harbor, you'll probably do it more than once. It's even though I've been here a few times, it is just, there's nothing better than doing this boat cruise that goes in and out of these bays that comprise the three cities, all of which were their own fortified cities in and around Valletta. And so in short, Mike, what the give us the description of what we see on these three cities excursion.
One of the greatest trips in Grand Harbor is from the three cities on a boat called the Daisa, which is a traditional harbor boat. So it's not designed for the big open seas. It's designed purely for the harbor. And it was used at the time where cars were not so common. And it's a long way around if you go by car or by foot or horse. So these were the taxis of their day. And they're still in operation today. And so again, they're little boats, 6 people maximum, 5 or 6 people, and they take you all around the little harbor creeks. And it's really the only way to get in because they're little boats and they're little harbor creeks. So it's probably the most popular cruise that we have,
Yeah, absolutely. Because it makes you feel like you were part of the history. And of course, any experience, any trip in Malta is not complete without really exploring this history of these famous knights, the Knights of St. John, all of the knights that formed, really were the foundation of the city. Mike,
one of the places we will go to in Valletta is obviously the Grand Master's Palace. And you've got all the staterooms there, which today are used also as the President's Palace. We also go to some of the palaces where the knights actually lived, not just the Grand Master. So we'll go to Casa Rocca Piccola, which it's still lived in by a family descended from the knights, and it's an open museum, so you can get a taste of how the knights actually lived. And they even have some war bunkers, air raid shelters, inside the palace itself. So it's a palace built by the knights in the 1500s and adapted in the Second World War to incorporate air raid shelters.
Yeah. And I tell you, can't get enough of this history of these knights, because what they did is remarkable. Anyway, we could go on talking about it forever, but the point is to go to Malta and actually check it out. We will visit we'll take part in a festa, which will be towards the end of the experience here. And how would you describe one of these festas, Mike?
If I wasn't Maltese, I'd describe them as being quite unusual, because they're very unique to the Mediterranean. They're basically a celebration, and there's a lot of music. So there's a marching band, a lot of color, lots of people join in, So it's a real feast, a real village feast, which I think is very typical of the Mediterranean and not so typical, quite unusual everywhere else.
For us, it's very unusual, and I think it's when you, again, that's part of the experiencing the culture, is actually attending one of these festivals, and where literally the whole town, the whole city comes out and partakes in like a parade, and everybody's out on the streets. And so I think that will be a highlight for a lot of people. As I was saying as well, we can't forget the incredible coastal scenery that we have, and we will certainly do at least one organized trip up to Gozo. And I suspect for those staying longer in Malta, if you go there once, and we'll organize this towards the beginning of the trip, you may very well want to go back on your own and explore some more, because Gozo is something really special. And I can say that partly because when I was last in Malta, you see this, it's like going to the cottage for the weekend in Canada. Everybody from Malta, it seems, wants to go off the island, off of the main island, over to Gozo, because the vibe is completely different. How, in summary, Mike, how would you describe Gozo as it compares to Malta?
As you said, it's the weekend cottage for Malta. So it's a lot more relaxed, a lot more easygoing. Everyone there is on holiday, even the people who live there. It's fantastic, and it's so accessible. I mean, as you said, we are offering a couple of excursions to Gozo, but there's a fast ferry in 45 minutes. You go from Valletta, which is where you're staying, all the way to Gozo in just 45
go directly
minutes.
There. Yeah, you can go directly to Gozo right from basically the pier that is 15-minute walk, 20-minute walk from the hotel.
And
so
I think it's also worth mentioning that if you want to do that trip, the grand price is €3 each way. if you're a senior over 60 and can prove it.
There you go. So that
if you're not, it's €6 each way. So it's quite reasonable.
It's quite reasonable, and this is one of the beauties of this type of trip is that you can do all these things very reasonably. We're also going to take in Comino, which is basically uninhabited, isn't it?
That's correct. Yes, there are 4 inhabitants on Comino. They've been there for quite some time. Every Sunday, a priest goes over to say mass, and then he hops back to Gozo. But yes, it's uninhabited, especially at this time of the year. It's obviously very popular in summer for day trippers, but surprisingly popular also at this time of the year for people who want to go there. Not swimming is a little bit cold at this time of the year for us, but it's an excellent place to go for a walk.
Exactly. And so we'll again organize a trip, and you will be mesmerized by the coastal scenery, the color of the water. And finally, again, I think, coming back to the history, and there's so much, it's everywhere. It seems like everywhere you go, you find ruins of these fortresses from back in the day. So we'll dedicate a whole excursion just to exploring some of these temples. In particular, Mike, what is special about the megalithic temples?
Well, first of all, there are so many of them.
Yeah.
We've got quite a few in Malta and one in Gozo. But also what you can see just from this photo, it's not just like Stonehenge where there are maybe, 20 stones. Here there are hundreds, if not thousands of stones, which are still standing 5,000 years after they were set up, which is quite fantastic when you think of it. And then when you're with the guide and he gives you the explanation of what each of these rooms was used for and means, and then the artifacts that they found in each of these places, it just puts it all into perspective.
And I know that our experience from here in Cyprus in coming to some of these ruins, that are maybe 1,000 years or maybe even 2,000 years old. In Malta, it's millennia older than that. So it's really quite an amazing experience. Well, that again gives you a taste of some of the things that we will experience on our Liveaway in Malta. Here, a magnificent view of the old city of Valletta. And I'll give you a few of the details. We've just completed the brochure, which is going to get sent out to you along with a copy of this webinar replay. It's going to have all the details, but as I mentioned, we've got 3 different hotels to choose from, the Excelsior, the St. John, and the Phoenicia. And so the big difference here, as I say, then what's new is that you can do Malta either for the full month, the full 28 nights, and with at least 15 excursions to choose from, probably a bunch more. There'll be no shortage of things to do. Alternatively, you could come for 2 weeks, for 14 nights, and combine it with either Cyprus, which will be immediately prior, or with Sicily, which will immediately follow the first 2 weeks in Malta. And so you could do a Liveaway that is in 2 parts. And so that's going to become a feature of all of our Liveaway programs. And again, all the details on this will be in the brochure. As with all of our Liveaways, the key point about the inclusions is that we have the activity credit, which allows you to choose from the different programs that we have going on, so that you can do as much as or as little as you like. One of the things that we also do on our Liveaways, and I know there's a few members who have just come back from Madeira or are with me here in Cyprus, we have our little messaging app that we use that enables us to communicate and who's doing this and who's doing that. So we really sort of bond together as a community and try and do things and discover and explore, and that's part of the experience, and goes with all of the other inclusions. Of course, our accommodation has breakfast every day, and then most of our excursions will include a lunch at a special place that we've picked out. So there's never a shortage of things to eat. And again, as any of our members will attest from our other Liveaways, we've probably all put on a kilo or 2. The only things that are extra, as with all of our trips, of course, airfare and travel insurance, which we highly recommend in this day and age. Talking about airfare, there are no direct flights from Canada to Malta, but it's pretty easy to access via one of the many gateways. A lot of people fly in through Frankfurt on Lufthansa. You can fly, of course, via London through Heathrow, or a number of other airports in Europe, because there's lots of flights within the EU down to Malta. And at the moment, the pricing seems to be fairly consistent as flying to any of the major cities in Europe. If you decide to join up with this program early, we have a special early booking bonus. So we're going to give you additional $200 in activity credit. And so that goes a long way to covering a lot of the activities that you might choose to do while in Malta. And so that's going to be available up until the end of April. And so now it's time to take any questions that you might have about Malta. We've got Mike here to answer any questions about the island itself. So Paula, where... Yep.
I can mention, so Lynn was asking if breakfast is included and if we have a kitchenette or coffee machines in the rooms.
Yep. So breakfast is definitely included at all of our accommodation on these programs. And these particular accommodations in Malta are traditional hotels. So there's no kitchenette per se. There's definitely a coffee machine and likely a kettle in all of the rooms at these hotels. And because of their location, there's lots of little cafes and places to go where you can grab a light bite to eat. And I know that's been one of the things that we've been very mindful of on these Liveaways here, is because we know that by the time you have a big buffet breakfast and then you go out on one of our excursions and you have another big lunch, there's not much room left for dinner. But as I say, there's lots of places where you can grab a light snack in and around the area of our hotels.
Perfect. Another question here from Linda was asking with regards to on our combined long stay Liveaways, is the transportation between destinations included, or do our members have to arrange that themselves?
Yeah, so we can arrange it for you. As with any of our Liveaway programs, we are happy to assist with your airfare. So either getting to Malta and back, or to Malta, or to one of the other Liveaway destinations in an open jaw flight, so into one and out, returning from another. But we can also assist in arranging the flights in between. And in fact, it's handy because, as with our Liveaways up till now, what we found is that folks were coming, for example, from Madeira to here in Cyprus, and so we all ended up arranging everybody on the same flight, because by that time we know each other and it's nice to travel with friends. So that's something we'll certainly do.
Perfect. And Trudy had one question here that's popped in to remind her of the dates for Malta, and was wondering which destinations are before Malta.
So either, depending on, so Malta is positioned so that you can do either Madeira before Malta, or you could do, I believe, I will get back to you on exactly which ones overlap. So you can do Malta in combination with either Madeira or Cyprus, or maybe both. But we'll let you know. We'll give you a bit of a calendar on what's happening when.
Perfect. And
yeah.
Oh, a couple more questions are popping in here now. Kim's asking if you have kind of a price guideline on how expensive dinners are, and they would be in the restaurants in the cities.
It's a good question. So Mike may be able to chime in on this as well. My experience of going out for dinner in Malta is kind of like anywhere. You can really choose your price range. I would say on average, you can go out for a decent sort of a main course, an appetizer, a glass of wine, and you'll probably come out around 35, 40 euros a head. So around $50, $60. Does that sound about right, Mike?
Yeah, I would say even 30,
Even
depending
30.
where you go. Yeah, but
maybe
nice.
My taste will have more. No, but I think the point is that there's some, fairly modestly priced restaurants. You'll find that a glass of wine is less expensive on average than in Canada, and restaurants in general are quite modestly priced as compared to at home. So you can go out, and I wouldn't say it's certainly not a cheap destination, but it's very reasonable.
Perfect.
And also, if you want, there are Michelin star restaurants in town as well. So, and so there's one just by the St. John's Hotel, so not far to walk.
Indeed. So for those looking for the higher end, you've got everything available to you in Malta.
Perfect. Linda had a question here with regards to what currency is used in Malta, Madeira, Cyprus, and Sicily. She's asking all four.
Well, then the good thing about all those countries is they're all in the EU, so they are all using the euro. So you only need to have one currency, and credit cards go a long way anywhere. So so that's very, very handy, and certainly very convenient. Good.
Perfect. That wraps up the questions that have come in.
Okay, fantastic. Well, if you have any other questions at all, as usual, you just drop us a note, and Paula will get back in touch. And if she doesn't know the answer, then certainly Mike or I will be able to get all your questions answered. And please do send them to us. We're really excited to have you on this program. And just before we sign off, next week, we're going to be having our webinar on our last call for 2022 programs. So if you are still thinking about traveling this year, you've been on the fence because of everything going on in the world, not sure where to go, we're going to be covering off the trips where we still have a few seats left to go, including Ireland, Scandinavia this summer, in France in October, and a few other ones that we've got in store for you. So please do join us for that next week. And I appreciate your time today for joining us, finding out about our Liveaway in Malta. Mike, thank you for dialing in all the way from Malta. Much appreciated your time, and apologies for the technical problems midway through, but we seem to have managed to get through it all. I look forward to catching up with you all again soon. So greetings back to Canada or wherever you happen to be, and we'll see you at one of our upcoming webinars very, very soon.